So it seems Gen Con faced some difficulties this weekend. There was water, leaking all through the convention center due to heavy rains. So it was raining inside the convention center in some areas, which could have caused, problems for vendors and attendees that were there. There's also the situation where there was a tornado warning and they were sheltering in place inside the building. So it was a complete mess on Saturday. And we're going to talk about that. It's also interesting to me that Gen Con has kind of in the past been associated with some reverse gatekeeping, where, they would say certain people they didn't like weren't allowed to come. They had a video once where they were like kind of being crappy about Gary Gygax and they were saying his name wrong. And it was a bunch of like the typical people you'd expect, blue hair, shaved head, that kind of stuff, that were doing it. It's kind of had a reputation about that in certain circles. So I don't know if this is a case of it's a terrible, terrible incident or it's karma or however you want to look at it. But it did cause a lot of disruptions, and I feel bad for the attendees and the vendors because that was probably a big old mess. And it was probably scary, especially if you had kids with you or something. So we're going to talk about that. It's just me today. Kneon is elsewhere. He has to take our daughter places and do some other work. So I'm probably going to do most of the videos today alone. It's very unusual that I would do a, tabletop or gaming video because that's really more Kneon speed, given he used to be a dungeon master and things like that. This is not my forte at all, but I am familiar enough with the situation and with past issues with Gen Con to be able to cover this without him. So please like and subscribe. If you do, I'll give you a woohoo. He also asks that I remind you that if you would like to listen to us as a podcast, we are out there just as an audio podcast as well on all the different podcast players like Spotify and so on. So if you'd like to listen there, please do. Please follow and subscribe if you can and give us a good review. Not really sure how podcasts work as much as he is, but whatever the good things are, please do them. So yeah, it was on X that they said that a lot of people were talking about it. The worst flooding hit the convention's playtest area, which I guess that's good and bad because a playtest area is where they're trying out new games and like people get hands-on, play with these to see if they're going to want to buy them. So it's not going to be, unless it's their only copy, which would be bad. It's not going to be as damaging as like thousands and thousands of dollars worth of merchandise sitting out. So hopefully a lot of people didn't lose too much. I'm not really familiar with what the insurance guidelines are for this event. I know I used to do different kinds of conventions and events, and sometimes you had to carry your own insurance because the event would not be liable if something happened. So I don't know if this is a case of it'd be the convention center who would be at fault because it was their roof that was leaking all over everybody's stuff, or if they would consider you to have your own personal insurance to cover damages. If anybody knows, how the situation is going to work out, please, let us know in the comments, because sometimes they're like, well, you're attending this event, but you waive all, right to damages or anything else unless you have your own insurance. But given that it was the building itself, I would think it would be the building's fault, the convention center's fault. But we'll see. Not really sure how that works. So what happened? According to, is it Dexerto? I'm not sure how you say it. Gaming convention attendees forced to shelter after roof leaks and tornado warning. Again, I am really, really sorry to all the vendors and the attendees that were impacted by this, because that's not cool, especially the tornado warning, which would be kind of scary. I'm from PA. We do get the tornado warnings here and tornadoes here, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is like, in Oklahoma and out that way. So it's just, the whole situation is just sad. But Gen Con, I'm not sure how I don't want to see any convention get damages. But I also want to point out that Gen Con has been in controversy before. They've had political pushback. They said some critics and commentators on social media argue the convention leans heavily into progressive or woke messaging. When it was a Gygax convention initially, and you can't even say the person's name correctly, and all you're doing is shitting on them because you think they're the patriarchy or whatever. Yeah, I can kind of understand it. They said they're pointing to panel selections, codes of conduct, and public stances taken by organizers. Well, they've gone after the state of Indiana because they didn't like the religious freedom bill, and they've gone after the state of Indiana because they didn't like the abortion ban that was in place. And they do have some messaging that's for somebody who's supposed to be apolitical, an event that's supposed to be like politically neutral. There are sure as hell is a lot of political maneuvers by the people behind the event, and they have been before. They said friction debates often flare up online between attendees who appreciate the convention's inclusivity initiatives and critics who feel real-world political discourse overshadows the focus of the tabletop commerce and gaming. Yeah, it's about gaming. That's what it should be about. And look, I'm all about anybody who wants to play should be allowed to play. It's always been that way for a lot of these games. I don't know why they keep saying it wasn't. Kneon was a dungeon master. They had people, all different kinds of people would play. They didn't care. They were just happy people wanted to play. Like, the only time an issue arises in this kind of situation is when you get somebody in there that identifies differently, but then they want to make everything about them and their identity what happens is these people come in and then they get in positions of power and they use it to block out people they don't like. Because even if you're just questioning why is it apolitical? Well, that's because you're a misogynist, sexist, istophobic, whatever. And then they were, not letting certain people attend. They do tend to have a lot of panels that definitely fall into those categories as well. I'm like, just don't go to those panels then. It's not a big deal. My only issue is when it's being used to keep others out while demanding that you be inclusive of them. That's the only time I have a problem with it. Like when they were making fun of, Gary Gygax couldn't even say his name right, and they were being complete asshats in that video. I had a problem with that. That's what I have a problem with. I think everybody should be allowed to play. If you truly believe that, that's for everyone, then it should be for everyone, not everyone that accepts you and no one else. That's not what that means. It should be in a political thing. I'm sorry. I think that we've had a lot of issues with taking certain, characters out or changing certain things because of, extreme people who are all focused on identity and inserting identity into things that didn't have it. And it's been a big kind of shit show lately. And I'm sorry if you don't agree, that you don't have to agree. But I think everybody should be allowed to play. But I think you should also understand that you don't get to gatekeep other people out either. That's the end of it. Anti-harassment policies are great, except I tend to notice that they only work in one direction. And I just believe that everybody's cool as long as they're not an asshole and give you a reason that they're not cool. So for that regard, I do feel in some ways like, well, you know what? You kind of been dicks. But I also feel that there's a lot of people who worked really hard for the event. And there's a lot of people who were there that were completely innocent in all of it. And I guess Kneon said they're trying to walk that back now. I don't know because I don't usually cover this stuff. But, maybe there's a little bit of karma here. I don't know. But I feel bad for anybody who got caught up in it. Gen Con was disrupted on August 1st after heavy rainfall caused the roof of the Indiana Convention Center to leak heavily onto the convention floor, which really, really sucks for vendors and attendees. A tornado warning was issued as well. They had to shelter in place. So they said that the event draws tens of thousands of attendees each year for board games, tabletop RPGs, and card games, and the venue roof started leaking. They said the flooding first broke out in Hall B with a heavy stream of water pouring for around 20 minutes before spreading to multiple areas of the building. The playtest area got the worst of it. They said they were trying out games Everdell, Canvas, and Blood Rage. We're going to look at these videos here in a second. Gen Con staff wheeled out trash containers, like big trash containers, to try to catch the water, to get it in the can so they could take it outside and dump it. There was also a tornado warning, so the convention officials, used loudspeakers to tell people to shelter in place, move away from windows, etc., etc. It caused a lot of confusion. It probably caused damages. Here's some videos. I don't have sound on these, but you can see they have the big buckets, and it's like literally raining into the garbage bin bucket things. I think it's kind of funny. They had actually pool inflatables here, and also they were using them to try to move the water different directions so it wasn't like raining on their stuff. You can see here it's literally pouring out of this. It looks like it's running down along these beams. Wherever it's leaking, it's running down, and then it's pouring. I think it's overflowing and coming down onto the stuff, which sucks because it's probably ruining people's merchandise, which I hate to see. I mean, that stuff's not cheap. And a lot of people bring a lot of their stuff with them to this event because they're going to sell a lot. Let's be honest. And then it's all destroyed on your big day, which is Saturday. That's a little concerning. So again, why I was worried about people having insurance and how that worked, because that's just a mess. So they go on down here. They're saying that they said it's the first weather disruption of its kind since it's been there since 2003. They said it's not the first time that events had flooding. Katsukon had to be evacuated last year because a wastewater pipe burst above Artist Alley. I do remember hearing about that. Again, that's awful. My biggest recommendation is if you are a vendor, and there's insurance that can cover this kind of stuff, or if things happen that damages your merchandise. I know it costs more money, but usually you can get like a yearly thing, or or for this many months, or you could even for per event you could buy insurance if you're worried about a certain event. And I know when you're indoors at a big convention center, you figure you're fine, but sometimes you aren't fine. So it might be worth a little bit of extra spend to make sure that you don't get your stuff ruined. Now, I don't know if did they give any kind of refunds for this to attendees? Yeah, I'm not seeing anything if they did or not. It's not really clear. I'm kind of curious if they did refund people for the day because the rain came in. I mean, it's only in certain areas, so they might not have, because it doesn't seem to have affected the panel areas, just like the playtest areas and probably a couple other sections. So they might not have done that. But I was curious to see if anybody knows if there was any kind of refund policy for the situation, or what they did for the vendors or anybody who lost any merchandise. So if you know anything about that, please comment and let us know, because I'm very curious to see what happened with that. But this is an awful thing, because Gen Con is a really big event. And, I do make the comments about kind of karma and stuff, but I also don't want to see an event be harmed in that way, or people lose their merchandise, or people that are there, being scared because of tornadoes or whatever. I don't want to see that kind of thing. It's a very sad thing. When I saw it was Gen Con, I was just kind of like, because after all the bad behavior in recent years, it was kind of an interesting wrinkle to the story. So there you go. Please like and subscribe and comment if you get a chance, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.